patients who experience constipation might need more fiber, and there are specific types of fiber in the diet that can help with that. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that. But the one thing that I also want you to remember is that it's important as you increase fiber content that you increase it gradually if you do so. So maybe only starting with a higher fiber breakfast for, several days. And then once your body tolerates that, maybe increasing your fiber take at lunch for a week. Allow your body some time to digest and make sure that you're drinking plenty of water so that the fiber can move through you. So there's two different types of fiber, soluble and insoluble. Soluble fiber can actually help slow down digestion. So it absorbs water and sort of turns into a gel-like substance in our GI tract. This type of fiber can help to lower cholesterol levels. It sort of binds to that cholesterol in our diet and then is excreted from our bodies. And it can also help stabilize blood sugar levels. This type of fiber, soluble fiber, is good for patients who might be experiencing both diarrhea and constipation. It can help with. You might have heard of supplements such as Benefiber or Metamucil, like a psyllium husk. And those type of fiber supplements are specifically soluble fiber. So again, those can be helpful for both diarrhea and constipation. And anytime that you're adding an increased amount of this fiber to your diet, you want to make sure that you are consuming adequate fluids and specifically water to help it move through your GI tract. So the other type of fiber, insoluble, this type of fiber can add bulk to your stool. So this type of fiber is specifically helpful for people who might be experiencing constipation only. So insoluble fiber does not absorb as much liquid. So think of like a celery stalk in a glass of water. It's not really going to absorb a lot of liquid. It remains unchanged as it passes through your digestive tract, but it will help to bulken up that stool and help with having more regular, normal bowel movements. So fiber is very good for us. It comes from plants. Again, it is a form of carbohydrate, but it is not broken down and absorbed by our body like other macronutrients are. So there's many different foods that contribute fiber. You'll see here that some contribute soluble and insoluble fiber, which are both good for us. However, again, if you're experiencing constipation only, then those foods that are high in insoluble fiber might be more beneficial for you. And if you're someone who experiences both diarrhea and constipation, then making sure you're getting those foods that are high in soluble fiber can help with that. So the next mineral here we're going to talk about is iron. And iron is a mineral that's found in a lot of different meats and some other non-meat sources. It's primarily found in the red blood cells. It carries oxygen from our lungs to other tissues in the body. It's also necessary for muscle metabolism and healthy connective tissue. So you'll see here there's two different types of dietary iron. There's heme and non-heme sources. Our heme iron comes primarily from meat, fish, poultry, and non-heme iron comes primarily from plant-based foods, beans, nuts, fortified grains, cereals, vegetables. And there's a word on here that I want you to take a look at called bioavailability. And the bioavailability of iron can vary based on different factors. Bioavailability, what that means is it's the proportion of the nutrient that enters our circulation or our bloodstream. So it's essentially how much of that iron is actually absorbed by the body and utilized for different metabolic functions. So heme iron, coming primarily from animal sources, has a higher bioavailability, meaning the body will absorb and utilize a greater amount of the iron from those food sources. And dietary habits will affect the availability of these different sources of iron. So, for example, vitamin C can help increase the bioavailability of iron, specifically non-heme iron. So, if you were to have a peanut butter sandwich or a peanut butter and jelly sandwich for breakfast or lunch, and you had an orange with it, the vitamin C from that orange would help your body absorb and utilize the iron that you would be getting from that nut butter. So you want to try to pair some of those foods together, vitamin C sources coming from different fruits, vegetables, and pair it with non-heme iron when you are consuming those plant-based foods to make sure that your body's absorbing as much as possible. You'll see up here I put the RDAs, that's the recommended dietary allowances for iron, specifically for women. So iron needs decrease as we age. So women ages 19 to 50, the recommended dietary allowance is 18 milligrams daily. Once you're over the age of 51, that number drops to 8 milligrams daily. So if you're someone who requires more iron and you've been instructed by your physician to supplement with iron, then that is something that you should follow. So patients who have anemia or any type of medical condition that inhibits their body from absorbing and retaining an adequate amount of iron may require supplementation. Supplementing iron without having the appropriate lab testing or the appropriate recommendation from a physician can actually do more harm than good. So iron supplementation can cause constipation, and it can also affect the absorption of other minerals. So, for example, supplementing with more than 25 milligrams of iron daily can actually reduce your body's ability to absorb zinc, which is another essential mineral. So I just caution you against supplementing minerals, especially outside of like a multivitamin, without knowing specifically what your lab values are and if it's actually indicated. So it kind of comes back to that same message that what is recommended for one person is not necessarily appropriate for another. So these RDAs of iron for women, these are general recommendations, again, for someone who doesn't necessarily have an iron deficiency anemia. These are general guidelines for what is needed for maintaining normal metabolism and health and organ function in the body. High doses of iron supplementation can have associated health risks. So things like stomach upset, constipation, like I had mentioned, nausea, vomiting. Some of these things can come from supplementing iron and getting too much iron when the body doesn't need it. So there is what we call a tolerable upper intake level for different minerals and vitamins. And what that means is that's like the maximum amount that would be recommended or cautioned against if you were supplementing on your own. And these guidelines for the RDAs and the tolerable upper intake levels, these are guidelines that are put out by the National Institute of Health. So the tolerable upper intake level for iron for women of 19 years of age and older, including those who are pregnant or lactating, is 45 milligrams daily. And you'll see that's significantly more, especially for women who have probably gone through menopause already in that 51 plus years of age group. So again, it brings me back to say that you really want to make sure if you are going to be supplementing with iron that it is under a physician's guidance or direction, and that it's something that is prescribed by a physician. They may prescribe more than that 45 milligrams a day if you are someone who has iron deficiency anemia. But I strongly caution you against supplementing iron without knowing exactly what your body needs based on appropriate lab values. Most of us can get the vitamins and minerals that we need from a balanced diet if we're eating variety. And if not, a multivitamin is a good place to start. But anything beyond that, you want to make sure that you're consulting with your physician first. So that brings me to the next vitamin here, vitamin D. This is another commonly spoken about vitamin with a lot of questions and hype about supplementation. Vitamin D is a fat-soluble vitamin. It promotes calcium absorption, bone health, and it plays a part in reducing inflammation and enhancing our immune health. Vitamin D comes primarily from the sun exposure, which most of us know that we probably get less vitamin D through the winter months. So your foods that are higher in vitamin D include fatty fish like trout, sockeye salmon, tuna, mackerel, things like cod liver oil, and then your fortified foods. So you'll see orange juice fortified with calcium and vitamin D. A lot of breakfast cereals are fortified with a lot of these vitamins and minerals that we're discussing. And some cereals you'll even see are almost equivalent to a multivitamin. If you eat a breakfast cereal every day that's fortified with a lot of these, you're likely getting what the recommended dietary allowance is from that food alone. And then beef, liver, and egg yolks can also contribute vitamin D to the diet. However, an animal's diet is going to affect the amount of vitamin D that's found in its tissues. So things like beef, liver, egg yolks are going to have variable amounts of vitamin D based on what that animal's intake or diet was like. In terms of supplements, so just like many other vitamins and minerals, some individuals require more vitamin D than others. So some patients who experience malabsorption, if they recently had a GI surgery, or if you've undergone gastric bypass surgery, or you have celiac disease, some of these conditions can lead to decreased absorption of vitamin D, in which case supplementing vitamin D is indicated. Again, it is important to check with your physician before you're implementing any type of vitamin D supplementation. You'll see underneath the picture on the right-hand side, the RDAs for women for vitamin D ages 18 to 70 years is 600 IUs, and this does not change for women who are pregnant or lactating. And it increases slightly after the age of 70 to 800 IUs daily. So again, if you take a multivitamin daily and you look at the label, you might see that the vitamin D content on that specific supplement for multivitamin provides 100% of the daily allowance for women. So unless you're told that you're vitamin D deficient and the doctor is aware that you're supplementing with additional vitamin D, then it's okay. But you want to be careful with over supplementation. Similar to iron, too much vitamin D can also cause adverse health effects over time. Too much vitamin D can cause the gut to absorb too much calcium. So too much of a good thing or too much of a vitamin is not always a good thing. We want to make sure that our bodies are getting what we need so that things can function properly. But we don't want an overabundance of vitamins and minerals that would then impact our health in other ways. Next here I have calcium. So calcium is a mineral that's important for healthy teeth and strong bones. It is important for lessening bone loss after menopause. So women tend to lose approximately 1% of their bone mineral density per year after menopause. Calcium primarily, as we know, comes from food sources of dairy. So your milk, yogurt, cheese, cottage cheese. There are also non-dairy sources of calcium that I have listed here. And for some of them, I put the serving size. So each of the foods listed there with that specific serving size has 100 milligrams or greater of calcium. So if we look on the bottom left, the RDAs for calcium for a woman ages 19 to 50 years is 1,000 milligrams. Once you're over the age of 51, that increases slightly to 1,200 milligrams of calcium daily. So this is another mineral that I know a lot of women will tell me that they supplement separately outside of a multivitamin. And again, it's important to make sure that your physician is aware that you're supplementing it if you are, and if you're already under the guidance of a physician who is recommending that you supplement calcium. then it's important to know that the absorption from calcium supplements is actually best with the supplements that contain 500 milligrams of calcium or less. So for example, if your doctor is recommending that you supplement calcium with 1,000 milligrams daily, then I suggest you split that dose into 500 milligrams twice a day. So you'll see a ton of different supplements that are available now out in food stores and pharmacies and drugstores. And you want to look for ones that have 500 milligrams of calcium per serving. This is because if you take 1,000 milligrams at one time, your body might only absorb half of that. And if you need more than that, it's important to make sure that you're giving your body what it needs and how much it can actually physically absorb in one dose. So again, with a lot of these vitamins and minerals, if we supplement, we want to make sure that we're not supplementing too much at one time, because it's likely that our bodies are not going to absorb all of that in one dose. So next slide that I have here is the My Plate. So a lot of you may have seen this before. This may also be completely new to some of you. This is like a general healthy eating guide that we try to encourage our patients and any individual to follow. If you are getting a variety of foods from different food groups, then you're likely getting a variety of vitamins and minerals that your body needs without having to supplement anything. Again, this is going to be different for those who might have a deficiency in a certain vitamin or mineral, or might have undergone some type of surgery or have a medical condition that indicates you need that additional supplementation. However, most healthy women can get what their bodies need from eating a variety of foods and getting different food groups at each meal. And even if you take a multivitamin, you're likely to cover all of your bases. So the My Plate is a guide to healthy eating. And what it shows you here is that, generally speaking, half of your plate should be fruits and vegetables. So eating fruits of all different colors, making sure that you're getting a variety. If you are someone who can tolerate fiber, making sure you're eating the skins of those fruits. So things like apples, the skins of vegetables like potatoes, pears, nectarines. That's where all of your fiber is going to come from. So something like a whole apple is going to have more fiber than a cup of applesauce. You also want to make sure that you're getting a variety of colors, so that you're not only eating green vegetables or orange fruits. You want to make sure that you're getting a variety, because each of those different colored fruits and vegetables are going to contribute different vitamins and minerals to your diet, and will have a more balanced intake. You want to make sure that your vegetables are a variety. Things like French fries don't necessarily count as a vegetable, despite what some people might say. There's a difference in your starchy and your non-starchy vegetables. So you'll see here it says aim to get mostly non-starchy vegetables. So your starchy vegetables are your potatoes, peas, and corn. Those are not bad foods. However, you don't want your vegetable every single night to be a baked potato. You want to make sure that you're getting variety. So your non-starchy vegetables will be things like peppers, onions, mushrooms, broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, mixed greens, cucumbers, all of those other good vegetables that contribute a lot to our diets. So again, you want to make sure you're finding what's in season and getting balance and variety. Dairy, you'll see at the top right. So generally speaking, 3 servings per day can get you the calcium that is recommended for a generally healthy person. You want to make sure that your dairy is coming from non-fat or fat-free sources. So if you are someone who consumes milk or you consume yogurt regularly, you want to make sure that you're choosing a low-fat or non-fat source of those items. And that's because the fat that comes from animal sources of dairy is primarily saturated fat, which is not really heart healthy. And it's something that we want to try to keep as low as possible. So when choosing dairy, you want to make sure you're choosing non-fat or low-fat. In terms of cheese, cheese is not a bad food either, but again, you want to limit it because it does contribute a high amount of saturated fat and cholesterol. Your protein. So in terms of choosing healthy sources of protein, you want to, again, make sure you're choosing lean sources. So we went through the slide with protein, things like chicken, fish, turkey, a lean cut of pork like a tenderloin. If you are a meat eater, red meat, a lean source would be like an eye round. Again, those are not bad foods, but variety is key. So you want to make sure that you're having some meatless meals as well, plant-based sources of protein, maybe a veggie burger you made with quinoa or a black bean burger, baked fish or grilled fish. So getting a variety of those foods is good for getting the vitamins and minerals that your body needs, and it's also heart healthy. You want to try to avoid a lot of processed meats. So things like bacon, an excessive amount of cold cuts, salami, bologna, those types of things that are going to contribute a lot of saturated fat and cholesterol. It doesn't mean that we recommend patients never eat those things again, but they should be limited and consumed sparsely. And then our grains. So eating mostly whole grains is important. You want to make sure that you're getting things with fiber, again, if you can tolerate fiber. So things like whole wheat bread, whole grain pasta, brown rice, other good sources of grains that you might have heard of that are good to try are things like farro, barley, quinoa. These can also contribute a lot of protein to a meal as well. You want to try to limit your refined grains. So these are things that are a little bit more processed, so that whole grain is actually removed from that food item in the process of turning it into a refined grain without getting too scientific here. So those refined grains are going to be things like white rice, white bread. What you want to look for when you're reading food labels and you're trying to choose an appropriate bread or crackers or flour, you want to look for the first ingredient to say whole wheat flour. If it says enriched, that means that that flour was or that grain was taken apart and put back together again. So if you see a label and the first ingredient says whole wheat or whole grain, that means that you're actually getting the whole grain flour in whatever that food item is. So in terms of talking about what's the healthiest, that would be the most beneficial when trying to decide what to choose. And I know now there's a lot of different options out there. So knowing what to look for on the label when choosing a source of grain can be very important. And then the last thing I want to mention here is healthy oils or healthy fats. So when you are cooking, making sure that you're using healthy oils like olive oil, canola oil, even with salad dressings, making your own salad dressing is sometimes the best way to go. And using those heart-healthy oils, you could also try a flaxseed oil for some omega-3s. You want to try to limit things with trans fats, limit your use of butters that are going to contribute a lot of saturated fat. So heart-healthy fats, like some of those oils that I mentioned, can be really beneficial for us when used in the appropriate amounts. So using a teaspoon of oil with some vinegar to mix and put on your salad with maybe some pepper and other seasonings in there to add some flavor. But you want to make sure that overall you're limiting your intake of saturated fat and cholesterol. And you want to make sure that you are avoiding any kind of diets or meal plans that are going to eliminate an entire category of foods. This is always a red flag. So the emphasis that I want to put on this presentation is that variety is key. So again, getting foods with different colors, different food groups. When you're eating a meal, you should take a look at your plate. I know not everyone eats all of these food groups at one meal. We probably get the most food groups at dinner. But I want you to think about it moving forward with your breakfast, your lunch, aiming to get a vegetable at each meal. And when you are having a snack, making sure you're getting a protein with that. So any kind of diet or meal plan that tells you you're going to cut out fruits or you're going to cut out vegetables and then a week later you're going to add them back in, those are always a red flag. Your body needs variety. It needs balanced meals. There are no foods that are necessarily bad for us. If you have certain medical conditions that contraindicate consuming certain foods or nutrients, then it is medically recommended to avoid those things. But generally speaking, for a healthy person without any kind of medical condition that would indicate otherwise, getting variety is key. So you never want to follow something that's going to tell you to cut out a major food group, because you're likely going to be missing out on important vitamins and minerals that your body needs to function and stay healthy. So that brings me into healthy snack ideas. A lot of people snack throughout the day, or they might have a snack in the morning or the late afternoon or after dinner. So in terms of getting balance and variety, you want to make sure that even with your snacks that you're trying to pair at least 2 food groups. So maybe you have a carbohydrate and a protein together. That could look like a piece of fruit and a tablespoon or 2 tablespoons of a nut butter, or a serving of whole grain crackers and a slice of low sodium Swiss cheese for some protein, or a string cheese or something like that. So I put up here some different snack ideas that would help to add some variety, but also would be inclusive of at least 2 different food groups. Some have more fiber than others, but just to spark some ideas. And some extra tips I put on here: to snack only when you're hungry, not when you're bored. A lot of us do snack when we're bored. When we are starving, make sure you have pre-portioned snacks ready for when you need them so that you don't overeat. So if you are going to make something like a trail mix, maybe you make it ahead of time and you leave a few bags in your pantry or cabinet so that when you're starving, you have it to grab, or to grab and go if you know you're going to be out running errands all day, or going for a long period of time without being able to have a meal. It can be helpful to have some of these snacks on hand so that we are giving our bodies what they need, and that we're sort of indulging in things that are healthier for us. I put on the bottom here as well healthier dessert options. So these things might look like Greek yogurt, graham crackers, and chocolate hummus. Again, going back to not all foods are bad foods. If you're getting that variety and you're getting fruits and vegetables and whole grains and protein, for most people, it's not going to put you over the edge to have a serving of graham crackers and a couple tablespoons of chocolate hummus because you have a sweet tooth. That type of option is actually considered more healthy than having regular ice cream. But I also want to leave off by saying that a serving of regular ice cream, if you're not someone who needs to control your blood sugar levels, is also not the end of the world. Because if we're eating things that are healthy and balanced, then when we feel like we want to indulge a little, here and there, it's okay to do so. Variety is key, and making sure we're getting foods from all the different food groups, and that we're not following anything that's so extreme that's telling us to cut out certain things. Because what I tell patients is the reality is you're likely not going to be able to follow that forever. So when you're thinking about starting a new diet or trying to make changes, think about healthy lifestyle changes and what is feasible for you to carry on for the rest of your life, essentially. Some of these changes can become habit over time, and then you might not even think about going back to old habits that may have been, less healthy. But if majority of the time you're eating well-balanced meals and you're getting what your body needs, then indulging in something is not necessarily going to set you back. It's important that you enjoy your meals, enjoy your snacks, but most importantly, that you fuel your body with what it needs and what's going to help you. And if you are going to, seek out additional help or support for nutrition or meal plans, then I definitely want to guide you towards the appropriate credentialed dietitians. So a lot of patients in the hospital will ask, who can I see when I leave here? What if I have more questions? I want a meal plan. And in the hospital, we don't typically give a full meal plan. We unfortunately just don't have the time to put something like that together. Those are more so outpatient requests. So registered dietitians are available at each of the Hackensack Meridian Health outpatient cancer centers. They're also available at certain HMH outpatient facilities. So these locations include Englewood, Hackensack, Florham Park, Neptune, and Old Bridge. And the way that you can find a dietitian who might be close to your area would be by going to the main Hackensack Meridian Health website that I put here on this slide. And if you go to that site, you'll see in the top center of the page, there's a button that says Find a Doctor. That will bring you to a new page where you can search by specialty, physician, and if you type in there dietitian, it will bring up for you all of the outpatient dietitians that are within the network, including these locations with their phone number, their address, who you can contact about setting up an appointment. The one thing that I want to emphasize here is that there is a big difference with someone who markets themselves as a dietitian or a registered dietitian. So registered dietitians have much more education. They've gone through a 4-year undergraduate program, and they have obtained an accreditation to practice as a registered dietitian or a registered dietitian nutritionist. So someone who uses the credentials RD or RDN, you know that they've obtained a lengthier education and that they practice evidence-based medicine. So if you find someone outpatient who might not be in the HMH network, and let's say they call themselves a nutritionist. A nutritionist could be anyone. A nutritionist could be anyone who takes an hour-long class on nutrition and says that they're an expert. Anyone can call themselves a nutritionist. There are no mandated requirements for someone to do that. They often have little to no education. They're not required to participate in ongoing continuing education. And typically they just overall lack the appropriate training to counsel on dietary management of diseases. So I just want to make sure that everyone is aware that you know the difference, and when you are looking for someone to follow up with as an outpatient, that you find someone who is actually an RD or an RDN. And if someone has obtained the appropriate education and credential, they will utilize that. So you will find very few registered dietitians who call themselves a nutritionist. So again, I just want everyone to make sure that they're aware of that, because there's a lot of information out there. There's a lot of misconceptions. There's a lot of different fad diets and ideas to get caught up in. And at the end of the day, you deserve to find someone who is going to provide you with the most appropriate nutrition-related information and what is specific to you and your individualized needs. So it's just sort of a word of caution, and to make sure you know what the person's credentials are and who you're seeing before you start to follow recommendations from anyone. And that is all I have today. These are some of my references, or all of my references, and I'm happy to now take any questions that you guys might have.
Thank you so much for this information, Caitlin. It was excellent. I learned so much. I do see that there are a couple of questions in the question and answer. And again, just a reminder to those who are in attendance, you can ask anonymous questions down in the Q&A, the bottom of your screen. One of the questions is muesli equivalent to straight oatmeal for health benefits?
Good question. So muesli does have a lot of health benefits. It is a slightly different composition than just like straight oats. And whether it's instant oats, steel cut oats, I mean, that's even a whole nother category of nutrition. Muesli is still very beneficial, and it does contribute fiber to the diet. So if you consume that, I know some people will have that for breakfast, and they'll mix it with some variety or variation of different nuts or seeds or dried fruit. Some people, instead of milk, will put either like a milk substitute or a little bit of yogurt on it. And that's a very healthy breakfast, and you will still get equally beneficial health benefits and fiber from that. It's just a different nutrient composition because it's a different food from oatmeal. So in terms of it being healthy and beneficial, yeah. Does that answer your question?
I think that does. There's another question. Oh, go ahead.
I see here, do you have a diabetic educator and meal planner, and can I have the number? So I do have a phone number specific to the diabetes educator who we recommend outpatient that I can give you if this person is listening and ready to write it down. The diabetes educator is located out of the Joslin Diabetes Center. So I believe that is in Old Bridge. So I also want to say that if that does not work for you or the location is not ideal, you can still seek diabetes education from a registered dietitian. So any registered dietitian will be able to provide you with appropriate information on carbohydrate counting, label reading, meal planning, how many carbs should I have at each meal. So I do encourage you to definitely follow up with that. But if this location is not good for you, you can speak to any registered dietitian that would be able to help you with that. So the phone number that I'm going to give you for the, it's Raritan Bay, actually, the Joslin Diabetes Center. The phone number is 732-360-4070. And then I see there is another question here. Hi, is it better to exercise before or after eating? This is a very much more individualized preference. In terms of how your body is going to utilize that food, I mean, it's going to vary, right? Because if we eat before we exercise, and you're doing it specifically to burn off whatever you're eating, and you're following some kind of exercise regimen, then it might work for you to do that before your exercise routine. A lot of people say that they can't eat right before they exercise. So they prefer to work out in the morning, and then maybe they start their day with breakfast or something after. Some people like to just have a small snack before they exercise. And if you are, I would suggest protein and like a small portion of a carbohydrate. But that's sort of a tough question because it is a very individualized preference. There's not necessarily a lot to support, generically speaking, one way or the other. It would involve, specifically if you're doing, strengthening and conditioning, are you doing cardio exercise? It would really depend on what type of exercise you're doing. And again, going back to those individual needs based on what your body would need to really enhance that exercise and meet whatever your goals might be. So, I'm going to just say it's up to the individual in terms of what your body can tolerate and what you prefer. And if there's a goal that you're trying to reach, then I would suggest that you meet with a dietitian outpatient to sort of nail down whether you are eating before or after, even more specifically, what is best for your body and what should you be eating to help enhance whatever that exercise routine might be. And then I see the next one here. Are vitamins via IV, like a Myers cocktail, beneficial or not really if one eats? So I think here that what you're referring to is a lot of those newer places that are popping up around our counties where they are administering IV vitamin bags. And I have to say, this is very much my own registered dietitian personal opinion, that I do not feel they are necessary if you are eating balanced meals and getting what you need from your meals and snacks. Again, it's sort of, it's one of those things where unless you are so deficient that your doctor is recommending that you receive some IV form of a vitamin, most of what you're receiving in that bag is so potent that your body's not going to be able to absorb it all in that one sitting. So just like I talked about breaking your calcium supplementation up into 2 separate doses, same thing with something like vitamin C. Most people can't absorb high amounts of those vitamins in one sitting. Your body, so something like vitamin C and other water-soluble vitamins will end up just excreting the excess vitamin through your urine with whatever can't be used, initially for metabolic processes and normal body function. So I think, again, that's more of a preference. You'll hear some people say that they get these IV vitamin bags and they feel rejuvenated and fantastic and like a burst of energy, and that's great. It's hard to say if it's harmful versus helpful because they vary so much that I don't think there's just one general answer. I think there's so many different options of what you can receive that it's hard to generalize it. But in terms of my professional opinion, I do not feel they are necessary if you're eating balanced meals and you have no indication of any kind of deficiency that would require you to get a more potent vitamin put into your system. The next one I see here, can you please indicate suggested intake of protein per day? So I actually specifically stated that I was not going to provide a recommended intake of protein per day. This is because your protein recommendations vary. It is extremely individualized. So what I say would not be appropriate for myself and everybody else in here. It's not a one size fits all. So because protein recommendations are individualized, some of the things that require higher levels of protein might be like a recent surgery, some kind of malabsorptive disorder or condition, if you have wounds or pressure injuries or you're receiving dialysis. Some of those things can indicate that your body is undergoing metabolic processes that require a higher amount of protein. But if you are looking for an amount of protein that is specific to what your needs are, I would recommend seeing an outpatient dietitian who can work with you individually that would assess your height, your weight, your general level of activity, lifestyle factors, and really be able to give you an appropriate recommendation that is specific to you. The last one, this is a good one. Is there a concern of having too much sugar from fruit per day? So generally speaking, when we talk about recommendations of fruits and vegetables, we should be getting a few servings of each per day. So if you had a serving of fruit with each meal, that is totally appropriate. If you are someone who is eating fruit at your meals, but then snacking or grazing on it all day. I know some people that, especially in the summertime, they could eat watermelon for 3 hours long because it's so good and ripe. Or certain fruits, you want to make sure that when you are having fruit, when I talked about having snacks or meals, that you're getting at least 2 different food groups. So there's not necessarily concern unless you have high blood sugars. So if you're someone who needs to monitor your blood sugars and keep them under control because they typically run high, then there is concern from getting too much sugar from fruit, and not necessarily because of the sugar, but just because fruit is a carbohydrate in general, and carbohydrates are what raise our blood sugar levels. So all sugar has fruit. Fruit also has so many other benefits like vitamins, minerals, fiber, that you should get the minimum amount each day. But if you find that you're someone who loves fruit and you eat it all day long, you would probably want to make sure that you're pairing it with something like a protein to help balance out the digestion of that carbohydrate. So helping to control those blood sugar levels, because that would really be the biggest indication limit or make sure that you're not consuming, an abundance of fruit throughout the day. Then I see the last one here. Is it necessary to have prenatal vitamins during the whole pregnancy? I can tell you that, I think it is beneficial. I think that is also a question if you're debating not taking a prenatal vitamin throughout your entire pregnancy, that you discuss it with your OBGYN. Again, during pregnancy, it gets tricky because some individuals lack certain vitamins or nutrients, and their body needs more during pregnancy, more than what might even be recommended for pregnant females or individuals. But that is a question that I would run by your OBGYN before I would tell you yes or no. I think that's a better question for the physician who's going to be monitoring your pregnancy and monitoring those lab values and making sure you're not deficient in anything, so that the baby gets what it needs as well as yourself. So I'm sorry, I don't have like a yes or no answer for that. That's definitely something I would defer to your OBGYN. Any other questions?
If there are no other questions, I do want to thank Caitlin so much for this information. Thank you to all who attended. If you do have any other questions, I'm sure all of you have my email address, and I can put you in touch with Caitlin as well. So if that's all the questions, thank you again, and have a great rest of your afternoon.
Thank you, everyone, for attending and putting the time in. Have a nice day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.